Barbara Davies-Quy, and welcome to our session on understanding and enacting global solidarity, building a movement in Wales. I'm Beth Kidd. I'm the Senior Development Support Manager here at Hub Cymru Africa, and I'm just going to do a few bits of housekeeping before I hand over to Claire O'Shea, Head of Partnership. So this event is a webinar format, which means only the panellists are on screen with their microphones on. All other attendees are muted. If you require automatic closed captioning, you can enable this by clicking on the CC button in the toolbar beneath the videos of the speakers. If you want to contribute to the discussion or make a comment, you can use the chat box function, which is over to the right of your screen. It's the two little square speech bubbles. And there's also, if you want to send questions to the panelists and the speakers, please use the Q&A box, which is the next button along with the Q&A in it. If you want to make an oral contribution or join the panel on stage, make use of the raise your hand button in the toolbar at the bottom of the window, and then we can invite you on stage. And we will allow time for questions to be dealt with after the speakers. We really value your feedback. So if you could complete the polls at either at the end of this session or in the social lounge when we end the session, we'd really appreciate that. And just to remind you all that no forms of offensive or abusive language or behaviour will be tolerated in the chat box or obviously on screen. And please listen with respect and be mindful of the experiences of others. So I'm now going to introduce Claire O'Shea, who is the Head of Partnership at Hub Cymru Africa, and she's going to do the opening remarks about the session on understanding and enacting global solidarity. Claire, over to you.
Thank you, Beth. So I think most of you will have heard from me already this morning. Today we want to build understanding and ways of enacting global solidarity in the Wales and Africa sector. Beth will be leading most of the session with our esteemed colleagues, Barbara, who works the size of Wales, and their partner, George, who works in Mbale for Metgate. Beth will give a bit more kind of context about that shortly. And we've also been lucky in the audience to be joined by some colleagues from across Europe who participate in the citizen-initiated Global Solidarity Network. Which is kind of where some of these discussions came from today. So I think most of you will have heard the talk this morning from Karimi from Christian Aid, who talked about what her definition of solidarity is and how we can act in solidarity with partners in Africa. In the last couple of years, we used to call this the International Development Summit. And I'm sure some of you eagle-eyed participants will have noticed that we've started to call it the Global Solidarity Summit instead. This is mainly because we feel like this better reflects the work that happens in Wales. There aren't many big INGOs doing humanitarian work or the kind of enormous programs that we see the Oxfams of the world doing, for example. But we do have lots of groups acting at a local level. We have lots of fair trade groups who act in solidarity through either through direct action or from how they choose to exercise their rights via spending on fair trade products. We have the Wales Centre for International Affairs as one of our partners who lead the way in talking about what global solidarity is and building knowledge in Wales about international issues. And obviously our key partner, Sub-Saharan African Advisory Panel, in the discussions about solidarity, who work to develop policy and understanding of the relationships between Wales and Sub-Saharan Africa. So we wanted to better talk about and encapsulate what actually happens in Wales. This isn't an entirely new concept for those of you who've been working in Wales and Africa for many years. It's something we've always talked about, but what we were finding is when we were talking about solidarity, it meant very, very different things to different people, which is, of course, okay. We all bring our own knowledge, we all bring our own expertise, we all bring our own context to the use of a word. But what we wanted to do was to help people understand what solidarity looks like as a verb. I think it's quite a famous quote that I hear lots recently when I've been looking at what global solidarity means. And we talk about solidarity, but we also need to enact solidarity and do things in solidarity with people. We know lots of people know what that means exactly, and others of us feel a bit more kind of loose in terms of understanding or how we can actually kind of mainstream it or work through our programs to do it. I think we were really lucky to have Creamy here earlier today, who really talked about what she understood by it. And now what we want to do for the next session is actually build that understanding and hear about what groups in Wales are doing, and then move on to a participatory session where we can build some kind of joint knowledge and joint understanding. I'm sure most of you know that Hub Cymru Africa is a platform that supports the sector. So we like to hear, strangely, about barriers to effective working, about barriers to you being able to deliver things, so that we can work on training, webinars, programs, learning to support people to increase their ability to do the work that they want to do and to do it well. So with that in mind, we're excited to have some good discussions today. I'm going to hand back over to my colleague, Beth. And you'd think it would be an incredibly smooth.
Apologies, I think we've had some technical difficulties there, but Claire was just in the process of handing over to me. So I am now going to introduce Barbara Davies-Quy, who is the head of programmes at the Size of Wales programme here in Wales, and George Sikoyo, who is the executive director of the Mount Elgon Tree Growing Enterprise. And yeah, just to hand over to them to share their thoughts on enacting global solidarity in Wales and Uganda. Take it away, Barbara.
Byd-eang, everyone. Good morning. My name is Barbara Davies-Quy and I'm Deputy Director at Size of Wales, and really pleased that George Sikoyo, who's also Executive Director of METGAY, is here to join us. And he will be speaking about our work with METGAY in Uganda. And I'm just going to give a brief overview of kind of how Size of Wales sees the concept of global solidarity. So Size of Wales was set up over 10 years ago. We're a Welsh charity which aims to secure and sustain tropical forests as part of Wales's response to climate change. And just going to share a few slides that I put together for the event. So hopefully this will all, can people see that? I'm assuming so. If you can't, I'll let me know. So Size of Wales, when I was looking at the kind of concept of global solidarity, I came up with quite a few powerful quotes, which I thought kind of summarised what Size of Wales is trying to do. So there's one that says, "I don't believe in charity, I believe in solidarity. Charity is so vertical, it goes from the top to the bottom. Whereas solidarity is horizontal, it respects the other person, and we have a lot to learn from others." And I think that's kind of, as Claire mentioned, the charity sector is trying to move away from this concept of development, of giving aid to people, but also about now really focusing on global partnership and global solidarity. And that's a really core value that we try and encapsulate. And also, I think, you know, too often it says here, we participate in the globalization of indifference. May we strive instead to live global solidarity. And alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. And I think that's where global solidarity calls us to take action on behalf of others for a common cause. So for Size of Wales, what is global solidarity? Well, we think it's about bringing people together around a shared interest and common goal. It's about making connections. It's about unity in diversity. It's about equal and horizontal relationships and moving away from this concept of kind of aid, of givers and receivers. there's a really strong link to social justice and, for us, climate justice. And relationships have to be based on trust, mutual respect, empathy, flexibility, and we need to listen to the needs of the people on the ground and embody true partnership. And that can be messy, it can be time consuming, but if we really want to work in solidarity with people all across the world, that is what we have to do. So for Size of Wales, who are we in solidarity with? Well, we are working to support Indigenous and local communities that are at the forefront of the climate crisis and the deforestation crisis. So here, I have a couple of slides. So on the left is a photo of a woman in a canoe. She's a member of the Indigenous people of the One Piece people in the Peruvian Amazon. And
Barbara, we can't actually see your slides. Sorry to interrupt you.
You can't see my slides.
We can't see your slides now.
Right, okay, so that's a shame. Why? Okay, hang on now. Can you see them now?
We can now, yeah. Brilliant, carry on.
Okay, thanks. So yes, the woman on the left is a member of the One Piece Indigenous people, and their territory, they protect a tropical forest, which is 1.3 million hectares of tropical forest in the Amazon. And thanks to the work that they have done to protect it from illegal logging, illegal gold mining, and oil exploration, still 98% of their forest is intact. And we are supporting their efforts to keep it that way. And they contribute a huge amount to global humanity. Their forest captures 57 million equivalent tons of CO2 every year. And if you look at Wales's carbon emissions currently, it's around 40 million. So actually they capture more CO2 and store more CO2 in their forest than Wales emits. So we are providing them with support so that they can stand up for their rights and protect their forests. And then in the middle, you can see a picture of a landslide in the Mbali region where we have been working for over 10 years with our partner Byd-eang. And these communities live in areas that have been heavily deforested, and they are very vulnerable to climate change and the effects of climate change. And this kind of concept of global solidarity is really important when we talk about climate change, because it's often the people that have, done the least to contribute to climate change are those that are most impacted. And we have been working with partners there to support local farmers to grow trees, to make them more adaptive to climate conditions such as floods and strong storms, but also to provide sustainable livelihoods for families, particularly women, through handing out trees that can provide food and fodder, but also kind of can produce beekeeping projects and coffee growing. But solidarity is also, I said, about coming together for a common cause and fighting for a common objective. And Size of Wales does that not just through our projects overseas, but also through our work here in Wales. And we aim to inspire people across Wales to take climate action, and particularly working with young people. So on the photo on the left is a mock COP, and this is a program that we run with WCIA, which engages students from secondary schools to hold a mock COP conference and try to come together and take decisions on climate action. And I think that's a brilliant way of showing how young people can kind of come together in solidarity and care for a common cause. And on the photo on the right, we have a pupil from a school in Cardiff that was taking climate action during our Go Green Day week. And she was actually there, they're posting a letter there to the First Minister of Wales, calling on the Welsh Government to take action on tropical forests. I think this is kind of a really interesting way of how we can promote global solidarity. It's also about making connections and amplifying voices. So at COP26, we brought together young people and Indigenous people and local communities that are affected by the climate crisis to kind of promote their voice. And I think, that kind of is highlighted by the feedback from the young people about their visit at COP26, where they said, the visit has opened our eyes. I knew there were problems in other parts of the world, but we didn't see how what happens here links to what happens there links to what we do here. Meeting the Indigenous people made us realise that we don't just campaign for climate action, but for systemic change. So I think that kind of link of solidarity between people bringing connections, and I think that's what, it's often about relationships, global solidarity, and feeling empathy for others to take action. Yeah, these are some examples of the action that Wales is taking. And we are hoping that we can become a deforestation nation and be a globally responsible nation. And the Mbali Trees programme, I think, is a really innovative way of showing how we can take global solidarity. So for every child born in Wales, a tree is grown here in Wales, but also in Uganda. And I'm now really pleased that George can talk a bit more about the programme and what it means to work in solidarity with Wales. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barbara, and good morning, good afternoon to everyone. I'm happy to join in this conversation about global solidarity and what it means, our relationship with Wales, what it means for Africa, and to Byd-eang in particular. Byd-eang is a not-for-profit organization standing for Mount Elgon Tree Growing Enterprise, active in eastern Uganda at the foothills of Mount Elgon, at the boundary between Kenya and Uganda. We obtained a not-for-profit organization status in December 2020. Our main objective is to support individuals and communities to plant trees to mitigate against climate change and to enable them to adapt to climate change, improving their livelihoods. And we believe that doing such is a noble thing to do. And we would not have achieved this without the support of Wales, of the size of Wales, and the Welsh government in the UK. Now, being a tree growing organization, since 2010, when the tree planting program was established under the Mbale Coalition Against Poverty, and the Byd-eang taking over in 2017, we've been able to raise and to distribute seedlings to individuals, smallholder farmers, about 17 million seedlings as of today. And we have an annual target of raising and distributing 3.1 million seedlings, which is equivalent for every seedling raised and distributed for planting to one person in Wales, which is equivalent to 3.1 million population of Wales. And we do not work alone. We work with our partners. There are 4 partners that we work with, and we have established about 56 nurseries in 45 sites. We also support beekeeping, where beehives have been established in the national park. That's Mount Elgon National Park, where there is a partnership between the smallholder farmers that live adjacent to the national park with the Uganda Wildlife Authority. the agency responsible for protection. And what we do provide for them is actually basic training on beekeeping, organizing them into groups, and linking them to potential markets. We also support women in ensuring that they adopt fuel-saving technologies, such as the Lorona stoves, which has got multiple advantages. For instance, it frees the women's time to look for firewood for cooking, because they use less with the Lorna stoves. And this indirectly contributes to the conservation of the Mount Elgon National Park, and also some of the forestry patches in the community, because less firewood is used. In recent days, in the last 1 year, through working together with the Sikoyo of Wales, we've been able to introduce gender equality, social inclusion, and safeguarding, where we have policies in place. And to date, we are mainstreaming into our programming. And also not only at the organizational level, at the level of Metige, but also at the level of our partners, where we see a very big response in support to GESI and in support to safeguarding. Now, in terms of global solidarity, what does this mean, and what have we learned over the years? As alluded to by Barbara, we appreciate that if we are going to support sustainable development initiatives, we are going to support justice at the local level, regional, national, international level. I think respect is very important. We've noticed on our day-to-day work that respect of people's cultures is very good, because it's a major contributing factor to the buy-in and support from the beneficiary communities together with their leaders. We've also wished to note that solidarity as a tool for reducing inequality is very, very important. And the recent mainstreaming of GESI and safeguarding is help us to appreciate a lot that we need to do in order to ensure social inclusion. In a number of areas, some of our cultures have been oppressive in the sense that they excluded women and girls. But through engagement under GESI and safeguarding, we are beginning to identify barriers and challenges that hamper the inclusion of women in our programs and projects. Of course, we are aware at the national level, there are policies and initiatives in place for social inclusion. I think where we've been having challenges is at the level of, at the local level, at the level of operationalization. Through support and the cooperation partnership with the Sikoyo of Wales, we are beginning to see our efforts bearing fruit. To date, out of 56 nurseries, we have got 16 women-led nurseries. And in comparison, in terms of quality of management of these nurseries, it cannot be matched by any other. This shows that if women and girls are affirmatively engaged, will go a long way in achieving the objectives of social inclusion and subsequently justice in our and equality in our societies and the communities. Finally, I want to say that in solidarity, has been alluded by Barbara, having a common goal, a common good, is very, very important, because it's what binds partners together. And because of this bonding, it is important that mechanisms for sharing and learning are put in place. We appreciate the efforts of the size of Wales in that regularly we are able to share information, including some of the good practices that we capture in the field. And we believe that sharing of learning is important because it will lead to change in attitude, change in perception, and also contribute a lot more to replication in areas of similar setting. So, global solidarity as it is, and with respect to our experiences with the size of Wales, is a thing, is a concept that needs to be mainstreamed at the local level, because of the potential benefits of not only ensuring that people are supported towards attaining sustainable development goals, but also ensuring that social justice and economic transformation is achieved at that local level. And this has got a lot of implications in terms of sharing the experiences, lessons learned with the wider global community, as we're doing currently through the size of Wales. Thank you very much. Hello.
Hi, I think you can possibly hear me.
Yes.
We're the technical difficulties are ongoing. You're getting lots and lots of applause and love from our audience. I hope you can see the kind of little emojis that are meant to replicate real life, where we would all be applauding the good work that you're doing. We've had a couple of questions. One quite policy driven about how we capture solidarity. But if you don't mind, I'm going to take host prerogative and ask a question myself. And I don't know, you might not be able to answer it, you might be, but I think it's something that's maybe worth talking about. So Barbara, you really emphasize the importance of relationships and solidarity, as did you, George. So the foundation of solidarity is relationships. I won't go so far to say friendships necessarily, because we enact relationships in different ways, but I know lots of friendships are born out of this kind of work. I suppose what I'm thinking about is the tensions of an increasingly digital world in building those relationships and building that solidarity. There's a tension for us all, I think, because we know that air travel, kind of holidays, all of it is detrimental to the climate. And I know Size of Wales and Met Gay, your ultimate aim is to enact climate justice through your solidarity projects. How do you think moving forward, knowing that there's two tensions between needing to build good relationships and having global aspects, but also being mindful of the impact we have on the environment, how do you think solidarity will look for your programme in maybe 10 years' time? And how will the environment have impacted on that? Do you think it will have improved things, or do you think it will be harder to enact the programmes?
I think the starting point, I would say that digital changes and transformations that are taking place is good for humanity. That's the starting point. However, the challenge is with the pace at which it is changing with respect to many communities, especially in the developing world like ours. So what would it be in 10, 20 years time from now? Like you've hinted, it has got policy implications at the level of government at national level to ensure that all the communities in rural settings like ours have the capacity to engage through digital platforms. And the importance of that is huge, not only for the local and national economies, but also for ensuring that communities, even within the local and national context, are able to share, are able to learn, are able to communicate. It's even much more better that if such initiatives are put in place, then the communities would be more exposed to the global settings where they're able to interact, learn, and share information. So the issue of policy at national level is very, very important. Although I know that there are a number of initiatives, even at local level, which is beginning to cause transformation, especially where solidarity has been built with the partners from other parts of the world, because they're able to equip and to engage, because they're able to equip and engage this and strengthen the capacities of these communities to engage with the outside world. Now, the other part of the question that you've said, what does it mean for our environment, both socio-cultural, ecological? It has got a lot of implications because, one, they will be able to access information, which information would be useful in management, in providing solutions to the day-to-day challenges that communities are facing at local level. They'll also be able to learn experiences from elsewhere, what other communities are doing, and be able to build this into their day-to-day initiatives and programs. In conclusion, I would envisage a different environment where communities the world over will have been lifted up to a much more higher level through digital platforms and opportunities that are available. So I would anticipate a better world than where we are today, and also a better environment like ours in Mount Elgon. Thank you.
Thank you, George. That was an incredibly rich answer and important points for us to kind of reflect on and plan for in the future, I think, particularly in terms of kind of digital infrastructure and things like that. Barbara, did you want to add anything on to that answer, or from the Wales perspective?
I mean, I think I think it's totally right what George has said about access to digital communications as an issue of justice, and there's such unequal access. But I think what we've learned during the pandemic is that we have been able to facilitate broader discussions that 2 years ago we would have never been able to achieve by using digital communication. So we organised a learning webinar last October with partners from across the world, and we had voices from the DRC to Kenya and to Wales sharing experiences about tree growing, which, if we'd have done it, 2 years ago, that would have been in a hall somewhere in Cardiff. So, I think there has been positive change, and we have been able to share knowledge, build connections because of digital transformation. But we are still seeing that those most vulnerable and at the forefront of the climate crisis are still unable to access those. So we do need to support that rollout of digital technology and access to sustainable energy sources as well.
Thank you, Barbara. I'm not going to take any more questions because I know it's important for us all to have the discussion in the next session. There has been one more question, which I'm going to park for now, from Roger about how to measure solidarity. I think it's an important discussion, but I think the next session and the participation might help us establish what we think solidarity is to us each individually before we can kind of build a collective on how we might talk about whether we're acting in solidarity or not. So maybe we can come back to that question post the conference or later today. I'm going to hand back to my colleague Beth, who is much better at explaining slightly complicated sessions. So I'm going to hand over to her skill set for the next part.
Thank you, Claire. Yeah, so this next part of the session, we're going to go back into the social lounge, and it will be a chance for us to go into some breakout groups and explore what solidarity means to you, and what some of the barriers might be in your work. And you know, touching on what Roger said, what we sort of understand the values of solidarity to be. So we're going to shut down this session, which will automatically take you all out into the social lounge. If you scroll to the very bottom of the screen, once you're in there, you will see 4 tables labeled solidarity, table 1, table 2, table 3, table 4. If you click on that, it will take you onto one of the tables, and there will be a member of Hub Cymru Africa staff there who will share an online whiteboard with you. And it'll be a chance for us to just kind of collate some of our thoughts around solidarity. And your Hub Cymru Africa staff member will be able to facilitate the discussion and support you if you have trouble accessing the whiteboard. So I guess just to say, to remind you, once you've done that, if you can complete the polls in the social lounge as well, just to give your feedback to us on the sessions that we've been doing. And we will share some of the thinking after the conference, so you can see what's sort of come out of this session. But just to say a big thank you to Barbara Davies-Quy and George Sikoyo and Claire for sharing their thoughts on a very interesting and rich topic. And hopefully we will see you at one of the tables in the social lounge. If there seems to be a lot of people on one of the tables, if you don't mind moving to another one so we kind of spread people out evenly, that would be really helpful. But yeah, otherwise we'll see you there, and thank you for your participation.